Alright, so what's up everyone? I'm back again because this past week, as most of you may know, and most of you may not know, me and Heidi Preeb actually do a weekly live stream on a page called SPA Sigma Personality Quotient on Facebook. So if you guys don't know about it, now you know. And if you want, I'll put the link in the description. You guys should follow the page or like the page on Facebook. It's a public page, so even if you don't have Facebook, you can still check out the live streams that we do every week for 30 minutes or so. We're planning on extending it to 40 minutes, but you can check out the past live streams that we've done, and you can also check out the future ones and a whole bunch of other posts that we place on there. It's a really cool page. But nonetheless, the latest post, the latest live stream that we've done was how to identify all of the NF types. So the INFJ, ENFJ, INFP, ENFP. And in preparation for that live stream, I actually wrote down a Venn diagram for all four types. Well, I did the Venn diagram for the NFJ types and the NFP types. And the NFJ Venn diagram actually came out to be a lot longer and a lot more detailed. So I was in the middle of class when I actually created this Venn diagram, and I was just quickly jotting things down. My teacher probably would have thought that I was taking notes on whatever she was saying. But after I finished, I was like, yeah, I don't think that I'll be able to get through all of this in the live stream or even half of it, especially with the other two NF types. And I want Heidi to speak just as much or even more than I do in the live stream. So I asked her for permission if I could just use whatever content I have over here that we don't put into the video to make a shorter NFJ video, like distinguishing the two types, because I've pretty much noticed that a lot of NFJ types are getting confused for each other, especially ENFJs thinking that they're INFJ because they're not loud and spastic. And so I'm going to first go through the things that both NFJs, the INFJ and the ENFJ, have in common, and then I'm going to go through some distinctions that you could possibly note to tell whether your friend is an ENFJ or INFJ, or even if yourself is an ENFJ or INFJ. But if you guys want a deeper dive into it, I have an INFJ friend named David. He is great. And if you guys scroll down my channel, you'll see a whole bunch of videos with him being featured in them. And he's a really awesome guy. You can check out his Instagram, his Twitter, Facebook, whatever the case may be. And we actually made a video last year talking about the two ENFJs, the ENFJ, INFJ, comparing those types. You can check that out in the card that's probably showing up like right about now for a deeper dive. But this one, like I said, is supposed to be a shorter version, so I will not take up 53 minutes like I did with that video with David. And I'll just try and run through these briefly. And if you guys have any questions, put them in the comment section and let's get started. So the first thing I want to note about ENFJs and INFJs is that they have a we do us type of mentality. And that pretty much comes from their FE. Since they are FE driven, FE pretty much is like social norms and not necessarily conforming, but more of finding objective principles and you know, just societal norms to kind of like either project or to kind of abide by. And so they're very harmony oriented. They're all about like what'll get the group's work done, what'll have the best synergy for the group. We can accomplish anything if we work together type of minded people. They're very people oriented, they're very people focused. And so when they're trying to accomplish certain goals, certain tasks, then they have that we do us type of mentality. And this is from both the ENFJ and the INFJ. ENFJs and INFJs are also both known for their depth of insight. Yes, even the ENFJ has depth of insight. Despite being an extrovert, they still have NI as an auxiliary function, and even FE. Although it may seem like, oh, it's shallow, whatever. FE is actually very complicated because it pretty much assesses all of the needs that people want, which are fickle. It's not a static or consistent thing, but it's repeatedly adapting to people's needs and taking all of the needs of the group of people and then kind of like condensing it into like one specific decision or need or way of accomplishing that need. And so that's also one way that both of them, like when you mesh this with NI, which is a function that gets into people's minds, that, predicts the future, that, dives really deep into concepts and just has like this kind of black hole suction of concepts, theories, and a framework of how life works, then you get a really deep well of insight that both ENFJ and INFJ tend to exude and sort of become what most would call either their psychologist or counselor or teacher or even a guru. They are intense people readers. Both ENFJs and INFJs are very perceptive, and because of that FE and I mix, being the two personality types of all 16 that have FE and NI as their dominant or auxiliary function together, they marry these two to have not only the depth of insight that I just mentioned, but they also are really good at, analyzing someone and being able to tell, how pretty much like reading into the person's soul, if, to put it in candid terms. And a lot of times I've noticed that ENFJs, including myself, they try to mask this, as opposed to INFJ, where it's more straightforward, that you're being read by an INFJ because their NI is dominant. But the ENFJ kind of masks it in a FE type of way so that you feel comfortable and everything. You don't really know that you're being read for a book in some sort. But yeah, they're excellent people readers. The ENFJ and the INFJ both live by objective principles. So despite being feelers, they are head types pretty much. Their principles, they don't really have, it's not necessarily they don't have values, but they live by a logical framework that they believe is objective and that everyone should kind of follow by, and this is due to their TI, whether it's tertiary for the INFJ or inferior for the ENFJ. FE is the other cognitive function that goes along with TI. So in short, the ENFJ and INFJ are pretty much trying to live by TI principles and kind of imposing a TI framework onto the world that everybody will be able to, use and live by harmony with. ENFJ and INFJ are very visionary types. They are the ones who try to look far into the future. They're not afraid to look far into the future. In fact, they're usually always thinking about their future in some way, shape, or form. And they take a long time to be able to process and understand where they're headed, what they want to do, and pretty much gauging how they should go about that task or whatever type of mission they're trying to accomplish. Both NFJ types are usually very kind and friendly, and this isn't to say that other types are not kind and friendly, especially other FJ types. But these are the types that are extremely warm, especially the ENFJ leading with FE and then having NI as an auxiliary function. ENFJs are usually what I like to call kind of Chick-fil-A workers, where they're just extra nice to you, and they are very good at making people feel very comfortable. And INFJs who have well-developed FE are often very good at this very same task as well. They are extremely emotionally intelligent. Just like I was talking about earlier with the people reading, ENFJs and INFJs, although they suck at being able to tell their own emotions due to lack of FI, because in their internal world they work mostly with NI and TI. They are great with, handling the emotions of other people and kind of like organizing and reading the emotions of others and helping them to figure out their own emotions and what to do with those emotions, and they keep other people's emotions on their radars. And so when they are out and about, they always have like people's emotions and pretty much overall well-being on their mind, and they kind of are in tune or connected to everyone's emotional well-being in that sense, and have ways in which they try to accomplish keeping harmony and keeping people in a good state of mind, a good state of emotional health. In doing this, they tend to actually absorb emotions. A lot of people I've seen state that the INFJ absorbs emotions more and is prone to actually not even knowing like how exactly they feel about certain emotions and whatnot. And I definitely believe that there are definitely INFJ empaths out there who take on emotions and everything. But from what I've found, this seems to be way more prominent with ENFJs who have FE as an auxiliary function, because although FE is a judging function, it judges first by taking in everybody's, subjective emotions and emotional well-being. So the FE user is literally swimming in this sea of emotions, in this radar. The FE Dom keeps their hand on the thermometer for everybody's emotional well-being, pretty much. And in doing this, they can take on so many other people's emotions oftentimes that they tend to forget their own emotions. And this can actually be described in more detail at typeinmind.com for the ENFJ's profile. But like I said, the INFJ is also prone to doing this, but I've surveyed a lot of ENFJs and INFJs, and it turns out that a lot of INFJs that I know, they really don't struggle that much, especially with the part of not being able to identify like which feeling is theirs. And I would like to think that this is because they have TI as a tertiary function, and so they are more prone to like separating, okay, well, this is your feelings and this is my feelings, and kind of like detaching more easily, whereas opposed to the ENFJ has FE as a dominant function and then TI as an inferior function. So it's kind of like very hard for them to sort through that whole sea of emotions within them, and they're repressing FI as opposed to the INFJ, who, although doesn't have FI in their immediate function stack, it's not as suppressed as the ENFJs, and so they have a little bit of an easier time being able to know like, okay, well, this is how I feel about something. In having TI as a tertiary or inferior function, both types tend to also hide their emotions or their negative emotions so they do not kind of like ruffle feathers. So pretty much they do not like to disrupt harmony. They want to keep everyone happy, and they often know the truth. Just because an ENFJ has TI as an inferior function or INFJ has it as a tertiary function does not mean that they cannot think logically. They often do think logically. It's just that they don't like to carry out the logical, cold-hearted or detached type of decision, because they're thinking so much about how other people will be impacted, and they're like, if I state this information, then it could hurt people's feelings, or it could, do this or that. And so I'm going to refrain from doing that, as opposed to someone who has TI as a dominant or an auxiliary, such as an ISTP, INTP, ENTP, or ESTP. They will pretty much speak whatever is the truth, and not necessarily that they don't care about the person's emotions. They may even already know, just like the INFJ and ENFJ know, that it will hurt the person's feelings, but they believe that it's the more logical and more helpful thing to do in that sense, as opposed to the INFJ and ENFJ. They tend to shy away from, ruffling feathers in that kind of sense, or they try to marry that with a lot of tact. In that way, they can tell the truth, but in a very colorful, not necessarily sugar-coated type of way, unless if you're sugar-coating but still being able to not dilute what's inside. Both NFJs tend to seek transcendence, so they are looking for depth of insight. They are looking to supersede whatever intellectual thoughts that they are having right now. They want to have an original kind of like perception for whatever they read, whatever they write. They're the types of preachers, for example, who can read the same scripture like all the time. Like I always think about T.D. Jakes, who's ENFJ. He will read to you a Sunday school story that you have heard all the time in the Bible, and then he will put it in such a way that it's like, I never would have thought about it in that way, shape, or form. And that's kind of how ENFJs and INFJs are. They're always just like chewing on something and like mulling it over, whether it be subconsciously or actually consciously, because it just bangs around in their NI and their TI, and then they find a way to kind of like, convey it through their FE and their SE through symbolism, fancy words or metaphors, analogies, things of that sort. And this also tends to make both NFJs seem very Zen-like, especially going along with their depth of insight and, kind of their like stillness. Like even the ENFJ, oftentimes when they are like, especially in one-on-one situations, they can be very calm and they can be very in tune with their NI, which allows them to kind of like seem Zen-like, guru-like, and it kind of like creates a ambience or an atmosphere where the other person just feels very welcome, and like the NFJ that they're speaking to is very wise. And lastly, both NFJs have very grand epiphanies. This comes a lot from me when I'm in the shower, when I'm reading my Bible, or even like when I'm like, just out and about walking and listening to a podcast. INFJs have a lot of these aha moments as well, where, things just subconsciously run in their minds, and the ENFJ's mind. And they just all of a sudden like, oh, wow. And so both NFJs get a lot of those types of epiphanies that bring even more insight to whatever they were thinking about previously. So now for some quick distinctions between the ENFJ and the INFJ. One thing to say first is that ENFJs, according to test results and everything, make up 2.5% of the population, and INFJs make up, according to test results, 1.4% of the population. So both are not very common. The INFJ is known as the most rare personality type, but just know that this doesn't mean that, they are special, that they are snowflakes of any sort. Same thing with the ENFJ, who is not common or whatever. That doesn't mean that they're special of some sort, just like if there are more common types such as SJs, that they're not special. So one thing that I've wrote down is that the ENFJ is supposedly better with body language. And the INFJ is better with logic, and this is due to their tertiary functions. The ENFJ has SE as a tertiary function, so they are more prone to getting into action, and they are more in the moment. They are more, like good at like observing what is going on right here, right now, and getting a quick rapport and assessment of that, especially when they have their FE, NI, SE kind of like in their top three functions working all together. So they're watching what the person's doing, their facial expressions, all of that, and they're taking a rapport about that. Now, the INFJ has SE as an inferior function, and so it's been said from Personality Hacker and other websites that INFJs tend to not really be as good with body language. This doesn't mean that they all suck at it, but it's more of it's not as adept as the ENFJs reading for body language due to the ENFJ's SE. However, the INFJ makes up for this with their tertiary TI, which makes them have a very logical approach to things. So they are a lot better at actually being able to take things apart and logically see the inconsistencies or the consistencies in arguments, even in like technology that they may be, working around with. And this isn't to say that the ENFJ is incapable of, like thinking logically and taking things apart, but it's just a lot more difficult for the ENFJ to do that, or to be detached from people in the sense as the INFJ. It's harder for them to like kind of like gauge somebody's body language, which is often why they prefer to just like talk on the phone and not really like face to face. The ENFJ is known as the most persuasive of all the personality types, and this comes to me a lot with Raymond Reddington, who I often mention. Like, he can just talk his way out of anything or persuade anybody to do just about anything. But then I also think of even the Netflix series Black Mirror. If you watch the White Christmas episode, Matthew from Smart Intelligence on there is for sure ENFJ, and I'm not going to try and put any spoilers in there, but it's just clear that he's able to be persuasive. He has FE and NI working very well together to be able to use a whole bunch of words to kind of like sway people in the way that they want. The INFJ can become very good at doing this as well, but they would not be as adept as the ENFJ would be. This also goes to their TI being tertiary, so it takes them a little bit longer to kind of think about what words they want to use because they want to be more precise. So as opposed to the ENFJ, who has SE as a tertiary, is just better at brah, kind of like what I'm doing here on camera. You just speak your mind and kind of have a natural way of the words falling into place. Maybe not all the time, but more oftentimes than usual, while the INFJ would have to kind of ponder and really think about what words they want to use before they're able to kind of persuade. So they're not really as good with on their feet. The INFJ is better with perceiving, and this is due to their dominant function being NI, which is a perceiving function, and the ENFJ's dominant function is FE, which is a judging function. So the ENFJ is a actual judger, and the INFJ is a perceiving judger. So although they both have the J at the end, the ENFJ is better at making decisions because they're more good at getting a rapport of what everybody wants and then being able to be like, okay, so this is what's best, while the INFJ is more prone to really observing and analyzing like what exactly is going on and getting trying to get a much deeper insight of all of that before they proceed with a decision. The ENFJ tends to go from people to ideas, which makes sense with FE and then NI, and then the INFJ tends to go from ideas to people because they are thinking about all of these grand ideas before they're like, okay, let me try and implement this into the world, while the ENFJ is like with people, and then all of a sudden they get these grand ideas like, oh, from observing all of these people, these are the type of thoughts, or these are the type of innovations that I want to put into society. A big thing to kind of mark the ENFJ from the INFJ, or the INFJ from the ENFJ, that I've noticed is ENFJs tend to like to use NI as their guide. So due to their tertiary SE, once again, ENFJs are prone to allowing their NI to load up to like maybe, I would say like anywhere between 75 to at max, like maybe 85-90% max. Rarely gets it up to 90%, but whatever percentage it gets to, the ENFJ is way more comfortable and actually prefers to just get into action and allow NI to lead them along the way, which makes them like very good. As opposed to the INFJ, they tend to allow their NI to load up to 90% at least before they take action. And so the way that David kind of said this in our ENFJ INFJ video was the ENFJ is more prone to running, and then if they see that there's like a broken bridge, pretty much once they get there, then they will just start hopping, and as they start hopping from boulder to boulder, piece to piece to get across, they are on their feet thinking this is SE and NI working together to kind of like make their next move along the way, while the INFJ will stay behind and think to themselves like, okay, like, and plan out the whole process first, or at least most of the process, before they jump into action and start trying to get to the other side. And I believe that this allows the ENFJ and the INFJ to reach the same place at the same time, but just at different procedures. And so it could be like, this is the ENFJ and this is the INFJ. As the ENFJ is going, then the INFJ just speeds up because they already had their plan, but they still get at the same spot at the same time. I've also noticed that ENFJs, a lot of ENFJs, including myself, love hugs. We give the best hugs, according to, I hear this all the time, from New York to Ohio to here in Virginia, everywhere that I go to. Like, people just, dang, Denzel, you really give good hugs. And after I started learning about typology, it's like, oh wow, that's funny, because I see all these memes about how ENFJs love to give hugs and everything. INFJs are not usually huggers. Even the female INFJs that I know, they may, like, spread love. They may give you a hug. My friend Jessany, she likes to, she doesn't really like physical touch, but she'll give me a hug when I see her, and she gives good hugs. David, he doesn't like physical touch as well, but he'll give you a hug. So it's not like they're like totally against it, but they're just not as prone to being like, oh yeah, like, I love hugs, as opposed to like the ENFJs. Usually, generally speaking, maybe not all of them, but most of them that I've seen are usually prone to liking hugs more than the average person. ENFJs are better with facial expressions, kind of like having a poker face, because FE as a dominant function makes them be more in control of what emotions they're showing. The INFJ having it as an auxiliary function, they have to kind of like work to get this. I've kind of actually even heard that INFJs are the easiest to read, because their facial expressions always show on their face and they just have like no control over it. I'm still checking that theory out with other people. If you guys have any thoughts on that, be sure to let me know in the description, not in the description, in the comments box. But my theory is that all FE DOMs are completely in control of their face, especially the ENFJ. I always know what facial expression I'm making because it's intentional. I just have a very good poker face, and I've asked other ENFJs about it, and they said the same thing. And then INFJ said that they used to suck at it, but then they got better, which makes sense. And I think this could even go with the ESFJ and the ISFJ. But yeah, you guys let me know what you think about that. ENFJs are better with facial expressions because they're FE dominants. INFJs can become good with facial expressions, but it usually just takes a little bit of extra work. Now, the tug between NI and SE is very strong. When the INFJ, who has NI as a dominant function, kind of like gets whisked away into their own mind, they seem to completely not even be present anymore. Like, they just completely zoned out somewhere else. As opposed to the ENFJ, from what I've noticed and even observing myself, we are still sort of present-minded. Like, I can be staring at you, listening as you talk to me and everything, but I will still be in like another planet, and I'm still kind of like taking in whatever you're saying. So you still get this kind of like presence with the ENFJ, that although they may like kind of like be somewhere else in their own mind as they're processing whatever you're saying, or they're thinking about their future, or whatever the case may be, they're still thinking, they're still here, present. The INFJ, on the other hand, they are completely whisked away, and this is due to NI being a dominant function with the INFJ, and SE, which makes them present-minded, being an inferior function, while with the ENFJ, NI and SE are like auxiliary, tertiary, so it's a lot closer. Another big thing is the ENFJ is more prone to creating their future, kind of pretty much like, I know what I want and I know the exact buttons to push in the exact order to get what I want, whether it be from people or my goals or together. And the INFJ is more prone to like actually knowing what the real future holds by observing and analyzing. So they have this great well of wisdom and storage of NI that they just know things, and they just know how things will play out. But but they're, because of their SE being inferior, they're not usually the ones to always jump into action and try and, like, you know, make things happen or create their future in the way that the ENFJ would. But instead, they kind of like position themselves in the right places to have things kind of like not necessarily fall in their lap as in like in a lazy form, but it's just like they just know what's gonna happen, as opposed to the ENFJ. It's like, oh yeah, well, I knew what was gonna happen because I set these dominoes up. And once again, you can see this a lot with Raymond Reddington. Like, how did you know this was gonna happen? Well, I set it up. I knew that you were gonna do all of this, and so I strategically, methodically made all of this happen, and kind of manipulated matters into my favor. And lastly, the ENFJ tends to have more of a sense, care, and appeal for style because of their FE and their SE being stronger. They want to appeal to other people. They want to look good. They want more people to like see them as like a big deal and, you know, stuff like that, as opposed to the INFJ, who it's not necessarily they dress bad, but they're not as consistent, or they don't care as much for how they appear to other people, because SE is the last function and FE is auxiliary, so it's not really like as strong as the ENFJ, who actually like needs kind of validation, or not even necessarily validation, but more of just it enjoys being admired more than the INFJ might enjoy being admired. So that's my Venn diagram for the ENFJ, INFJ. I tried to keep it short while also still going in depth. Hope that this was, you know, a really good video and it was helpful to you. If you have any questions, if you have any things to add on, be sure to leave them in the comments. If you have any disagreements, be sure to respectfully let me know and we can talk about them. But I'm glad that you guys are able to watch, and see y'all.